My name is Mark Philipp. I work for Studica Incorporated. We're a reseller for a lot of different software, such as Autodesk, Adobe, including Unity and GameSalad and some other and some of the game design engines. My email is markp@studica.com if you guys want to email me, or if you have any questions or anything at the end of this that maybe I didn't go over, or if you're interested in purchasing Unity or anything like that, you can get in touch with me. I could point you in the right direction. Um, what I'm going to cover mostly today is pretty much how and why game design is an important, interactive design / game design is an important discipline for STEM, and essentially how you can make the argument to your administrators and your people who make the budgets and the purchasing decisions at your schools, how you can make the case to them that this is very heavily involved in STEM and how you might be able to secure some of that funding for your game design program. And then I'll go into a bit of a Unity 3D demonstration for those who may not be initiated in Unity or are curious what it is. So anyway, I'll start off with, I'm going to talk a bit about the entertainment software industry. I have some figures here. These are all from the Entertainment Software Association and the ESRB. In 2011, consumers spent roughly $24.75 billion on video games, hardware, and accessories, and that's really significant if you look at the history of video games. Probably only 10, 15 years ago, that number was significantly less. Video games, entertainment software specifically, was more of a niche industry. It wasn't as robust as it is today, where we have actually several major corporate entities like EA, for instance, who have really brought games into, to the Hollywood level of exposure and production. My point is that there's a lot of money in the entertainment software industry now. This is no longer something people can laugh off and say, well, you'll never get a job, doing that, or you'll never make a career out of video games, because that's simply not true. Because my last figure on here, as of 2009, I couldn't find more recent numbers, but in 2009, the industry employed roughly 120,000 people with an average salary of $90,000. So that's a pretty nice salary. When you compare it to the national averages, it's a bit above the national average. That's from the Entertainment Software Association as well. And then in 2010, 67% of U.S. households own a dedicated video game device or console. When I run the numbers from the Census Bureau, and I figure out 67% of the total amount of homes in the U.S., that's roughly 76,916,000 homes that now have a video game device. So there's a big market, and there's a big pool of people who purchase video games and entertainment software. But of course, what about other industries? What about outside of video games, entertainment software? Because maybe you have students, or you yourself are not interested so much in working in video games. Maybe you're interested in something else, and that's where the concept of gamification comes in. And gamification, as defined by Wikipedia, is the use of game thinking and game mechanics in a non-game context in order to engage users and solve problems. So basically, the idea is that you would take game design methodology, or even programming and things like that, and you would apply these to other disciplines outside of entertainment software. So instead of making a first-person shooter, maybe you would take what you know about game design and you would develop a marketing campaign for a business that involves a certain degree of video game methodology. Like maybe you create a flash game where you reward people who get through a certain amount of levels with like a discount coupon or something like that for your company's product. That would be an example of gamification. Other examples where we're seeing this used is in architecture. And this is used for interactive 3D walkthroughs, and it's also integrated, not integrated, but you can use programs like Unity 3D alongside with software such as Revit, architecture, or even 3D Studio Max and some of the other Autodesk products. And I'm going to show you an example real quick of a 3D walkthrough on this guy's blog here. He created this model. Whoa, sorry. I'm not used to non-inverted first persons. He created this model in Revit architecture, which is an architectural design software from Autodesk. And it's very basic, but what he did was he brought this model into Unity and he created a first-person controller. And what I'm doing is I'm able to walk around with WASD and look around with my mouse. And he has a couple of commands up here, like a light switch where I can dim the lights, for instance. And if I walk up to this door, he scripted it in a way that as I get close to the door actually opens up. Now, these are functions that normally within the Revit software, you cannot do this. But because he brought this building in as an FBX model to Unity, he was able to add scripts to these door objects. And he also implemented where if I walk up to this wall and press E, it changes the material of the wall. So I can kind of get an idea of what different materials would look like. And I had a better example of this, but the website no longer has it available. But it was really in depth where they had actual like furniture and it was a whole house. And you can actually go up to the furniture and change like the kind of material you wanted the walls made out of, the kind of like lights that you had in the room, and even down to, you know, what material your sofa had on it. And so this is one example of how architects are starting to use Unity 3D to create interactive walkthroughs for clients and allow them to heavily customize, you know, the project that they're purchasing. So that's where we're seeing Unity 3D used. This is an example of gamification because before some of these game engines like Unity, we never used to see this in the architecture industry. You know, the 3D software like Revit or 3ds Max made it feasible for architects to create walkthroughs, but now they're able to actually do interactive walkthroughs and implement scripts into their models that would allow you to heavily customize a project that they might be working on for a client. So that's one example of gamification. In TV and film, they have what is now being called machinima or machinima. I don't really know how you say it. But machinima is basically, I'm going to call it machinima, okay? So machinima is basically utilizing game engines to create basically TV or films and like editing clips together and so on and so forth. And the best example of this is a web series that was created called Red versus Blue. At least this is the best example I can think of. Red versus Blue was around the internet, I think even before the YouTube era, but it was just a couple of guys who took the Halo engine, the video game Halo from the original Xbox, and they basically would manipulate the characters in the Halo universe and voice over comical dialogue and put them in these weird situations, and it basically turned into like a small sort of like almost sitcom series. And I think to this date they're still doing it. All right, viewer 120 says it's machinima, so okay, machinima, got it. And so Red versus Blue was doing that a long time ago, and we're starting to actually see, I think on the Xbox Live, if you have a 360 and you turn on Xbox Live, I think they actually have a machinima channel. There's a ton of different examples now of people using programs like Unity 3D and other game engines, or even like the Unreal Engine, to create like TV and film products within a game context. So it's pretty interesting, and to me it's a real clever use of game engines. In other industries we're seeing gamification is marketing, and we can see this through mediums like Facebook and a lot of others around the internet. But one in particular that I thought was interesting was the vegetable distributor Green Giant ended up doing a campaign where, this was some years ago, I think a year or two ago, where whenever you purchased a Green Giant product, they would give you a code that you could redeem to get Farmville cash through Facebook. And they actually not only had an increase of sales because of this, but their brand awareness went up, and they actually ended up having more of a positive reaction to their advertising and their brand after this. And you can see in this chart, you can see all the other businesses like Coca-Cola and EA. Green Giant actually has the most positive, positive look on their brand after they went with this ad campaign of offering Farmville cash. And that's a pretty loose example of gamification, but in my mind it still is a valid example because they used kind of an incentive of, you know, buy something and you get extra points that you can spend on in-game cash and, you know, build extra crops in Farmville. To me, it was heavily involved with video games to an extent that I could call it gamification. But that's just one example of where marketing is starting to use games. And you can even look at people like Mountain Dew or some of these other businesses on their websites. They're starting to make, you know, these Flash-based or HTML5 based kind of games where, you know, it's all about their specific product or something, but you can play through these games and it's all about just creating a brand awareness. But that's an example of gamification as well. Even more industries, social media is a good example, specifically Facebook, because individuals are allowed to develop apps for the platform, which has pretty much given rise to a ton of Facebook games. And like I just mentioned, Farmville or Bejeweled Blitz or The Sims Social, I mean, whatever it is, millions of people are playing these things on a daily basis, and we've started seeing these games start to implement advertising, either directly in the game or through things such as sidebars on Facebook. You know, so we're starting to see a lot of ad revenue come in through people playing these games. And so, you know, some also say that Facebook has kind of gamified its own experience by implementing things like the promote feature, or even the like feature, you know, because the more promotes and more likes you have, the more likely your article is going to be seen by more and more people. And if that's your goal, especially if you're a business or even an artist or like a filmmaker or something, you know, the more you can spread your ad and the more people are going to see it based on how many people promote it. And that's what you want ultimately, because you might be able to cash in on, you know, on that awareness. And then finally, the curious case of Foldit. I don't know why I called it the curious case of Foldit, but some of you might know what Foldit is. First of all, it's a video game that encourages biochemical research. It was developed by the University of Washington Center for Game Development in combination with the biochemistry department there. And this actually made some front page news, I think 2 or 3 years ago, because the people who ran Foldit proposed a puzzle in the game. Oh, sorry. Well, first of all, Foldit is, so that you understand, Foldit is a puzzle game that uses proteins. It basically asks the user to fold a protein into the most efficient shape possible, and you're given a score based on how well you fold it. That's why the game's called Foldit. And they have like a leaderboard and everything, people who have the highest score, and there's thousands, I think hundreds of thousands of users on this game. And what they ended up doing was they basically proposed a puzzle in the game that said, you know, based on, you know, these properties that we have here, how would you fold this protein in the most efficient shape possible? And like a handful of people who played this game actually figured it out, and what it turned out to be was a specific strain of an HIV protein that biochemists had not been able to figure out for the last 20 to 30 years. And based on the puzzle that these players in Foldit came up with, the biochemists actually took this information, they double checked all of it, they ran all their numbers and did some further research and found out this was in fact the protein for this specific HIV strain. And this was something nobody had figured out before. And so this was a case of seeing gamification used for scientific research. And they actually crowdsourced scientific research across hundreds of thousands of people. And I'll show the game real quick. It's pretty basic. I'll just do an intro puzzle. And turn this down a little bit. Whoa, my computer's lagging. I think I'm going to crash. Oh well. Maybe I can't show it off, but hopefully through my description you kind of got the idea. Oh, there we go. So this is just the opening tutorial level, and it tells you how to do it. And these are side chains, so I moved that out, and it just tells me congratulations because I got rid of the conflict of this side chain being too close to the other one. And then you basically just go through a series of different puzzles. You know, it tells you get 7,700 points to win. I can drag my view. I'm going to fix these conflicts by moving these chains out farther. And so that's the basic idea of Foldit. And all this information is given back to, the University of Washington, not only Center for Games, but they send this data out to the biochemistry department and they research all this stuff. And, you know, it helps them in their research for new proteins, new chemicals. I mean, even down to, you know, some of this stuff could be used to develop new vaccines or new drugs. to help fight certain things. So this was a really clever creation. It's still used today. And like I was saying, a couple of years back, it made front page news. And this was probably, a lot of people say this is probably the best example of gamification so far. So that's one instance. Well, let me go back 1 second, just drive home a point. So what I'm getting at with all of these is that video game design is no longer only being used in the entertainment discipline. I mean, 10, 15, 20 years ago, yeah, we had Super Mario and Zelda and all these fun games, and we never really saw games used beyond creating these fun and entertaining devices and creations. But now that the technology has not only gotten a lot more democratized and easier to use for people, and a lot more powerful as well, we're starting to see this used all over the place. So game design is no longer just a very niche category. It's actually something that could encapsulate a very broad spectrum of industries, and it's a very worthwhile discipline now. And so for educators like some of you, it's a very good thing to be teaching students. And I remember recently I was talking to some guys with Game Salad, which is a 2D game engine. They were talking about how even the president, our current president Obama, was pushing for people to actually get into game design, and he was encouraging more schools to adopt this kind of curriculum. And it's been a bit difficult because some administrators and some people don't think game design is a worthwhile investment for STEM education, which is obviously where most of the money's at right now in education. If you want to get a budget for your class, you pretty much got to be STEM. And I had somebody, when I first did this presentation, tell me that he's not able to put a curriculum in his school for game design because his administrators didn't think it was STEM related, and that's what prompted me to kind of respond to that. And that's kind of what this webinar is all about. So how does game design fit in with STEM education? First of all, you got science, which is the S. Video game design is heavily involved with computer science. It teaches people the fundamentals of programming, and even I mean high level programming too. If you get really into game design, you got to know everything about C++ or C# and Java even, and all sorts of programming languages. Sometimes even SQL, MySQL, so you can interact with databases, as is the case with a lot of MMORPGs and online games. And science as well. You got physics, especially nowadays with 3D games. You got to be able to manipulate physics, and if you don't have an engine to work with that has a physics engine already, you might actually have to develop your own based on the actual laws of physics and the different calculations and formulas people have come up with over the years. On top of physics, there's tons of math, down from algebra to linear equations to everything, calculus, trig, geometry. Especially in 3D development, you deal heavily with things like geometry, trig, and then you go into like calculus. And then logical thinking, and this isn't exactly a discipline, but I think most people agree that people should be thinking very logically about decisions or about the work that's presented to them. And I think with game design, and especially when you get into programming, that really starts to come out, because you have to start thinking in a logical way in order to tell the computer what you want it to do. So technology is the T in STEM. This is pretty self-explanatory. Video game design is directly involved with computers, and especially new devices that utilize touch screens and then tablet machines and so on and so forth. To be an effective game designer, you have to have a pretty decent understanding of computer hardware so that you know what you're capable, what your limitations are with your software, because your hardware can only run so much. So it helps teach you, what each piece of hardware does, what the limitations of your hardware is, and if you're really into it, you might even get down to things like the assembly language of your machine. And you might even understand a bit of binary by doing this. And this is all related to technology. I mean, video games are technology, plain and simple. So there's no way to say that this is not related to technology. Engineering is probably the hardest sell, I would say, with STEM and video games. But you have to know some electrical engineering concepts as you get farther into game design. And one I thought about the other day was audio engineering, and this may not strike anybody. I mean, this might be a surprise to some people that I would say that, but with games nowadays, we're no longer just using like little sound bites and MIDI programmed music in the background from like the 70s and 80s, you know. We actually have full on productions now where there's like voice actors involved, and you have full on recording studios. People are recording, 24-bit audio. I mean, it's as close as you can get to vinyl practically. While the game designer might not totally understand audio engineering, they still have to utilize audio and understand certain parts of the engineering aspects of sine waves and things like that in order to implement that into their game. Again, engineering is probably the hardest sell here, but even farther beyond that, to develop, say, realistic levels or realistic scenes in your game, sometimes it's good to know certain concepts of engineering so you could create, say, structures or buildings in your game that would act accordingly to the physics of your engine. And so if you have a soundly engineered building or a soundly engineered, say, bridge in your game, if you have a guy like flying a jet in your game and he bombs the bridge, based on the physics, you want that bridge to be able to crumble in a realistic manner. Well, if you built the bridge within your game and it's engineered and it's realistically engineered, then you should see that bridge react pretty realistically and according to the actual laws of physics. So again, I don't know if a game designer is going to go hardcore into all these aspects of engineering, but it's still kind of an introductory look at it. Electrical engineering is probably the biggest involvement there, is just understanding how your machine's communicating with all of the different hardware and what your software is doing to that hardware as it runs. Mathematics is, I don't even have to go into that really. I mean, everything about game design is fundamentally associated with mathematics. You wouldn't be able to design a game without knowing math. It's that simple. And many of these game engines take care of that groundwork for you because it's very complicated otherwise. But what about STEAM? And STEAM is basically STEM, but they add the art aspect. And I had somebody recently tell me, well, you should talk about the art aspect too. And I said, it's a good idea because I'm one of those people who think that video games should be treated as art to a certain extent. I know that's kind of a big debate in the actual Supreme Court and everything, where whether or not games are protected under the First Amendment, so on and so forth, but I won't get into all that. I'm going to make the argument, though, that it is art and that you could even qualify this for Steam because you have to deal with 2D images if you're doing a 2D game and animations, or if you're doing a 3D game, you have to deal with 3D models. And if you think the things Pixar is doing is art, then I don't see why a video game with 3D models created by people who are artists working in 3ds Max or Maya should not be considered art. And nowadays in games, we're practically talking about like Hollywood productions. You have music composition, you have voice acting, you even have cinematography to a point. There's lighting in games. You have to worry about what shots you're doing, where you're going to cut scenes if you're doing cut scenes like that. A fine example, I would say, and some of you may or may not be familiar with, is the Metal Gear Solid series by Hideo Kojima. I mean, he implemented all of these aspects into his games, and to me they play out much like a film does, and it's hard to say that's not art. And then level design as well. All these things require 3D modeling, and they require a certain level of artistic creativity to make them happen. So when you go to your administrators and you're trying to get STEM money from them to do game design, just argue with them about it, because to me it's ridiculous to say that video games aren't STEM related. And I think it would be very beneficial for this kind of curriculum to get implemented into schools, because we need more people who know programming, and very few schools are even offering computer science, and games is a very fun way to engage young people in the concepts of computer science without them just staring at blocks of codes all day and making random number generators. That can get kind of dull, I would say. So I think with that, I'll go ahead and hop into a quick Unity demonstration. Unity 3D is a game engine that's developed by Unity Technologies. It's actually free to download on their website for the free version, and then they have pro versions that have more features and things like that. It's important to note, if you are an educator and you're going to teach it in class, that you do have to purchase like a site license or whatever from Unity, but I'll go into that later. So Unity 3D is a game engine. A game engine is essentially a set of code. Well, I don't know how I would define it. It's basically like all the groundwork for creating a game is already there for you, and it gives you a development kit for you to utilize their engine that they've made to create something that you want to create. So within Unity, this looks pretty familiar to, if any of you have ever used something like 3ds Max or Maya. We have a viewport right here. I mean, I got my assets down here. And I'm using Unity 4, so this is their newest one. They changed it a little bit from Unity 3. The interface is a bit different. We have the inspector over here. I have a hierarchy over here. So right now I have an empty scene in Unity. And what I can do, the way Unity works is it runs off of game objects. And if I go up here, hit game object, hit create empty. Okay, sorry, I was making sure I was recording. For a second I thought I wasn't. I was just going to freak out. When I make a new game object, this is like the fundamental building block in Unity. All it is an XYZ node. So basically all it has, if I look at my inspector, this will show me all the properties or all of the components that are on my game object. Right now all there is a transform with a position in XYZ space. But it's really nothing currently, and I can see in my hierarchy, and all it is XYZ, and I can move it around, but it has nothing associated with it yet. If I wanted, what I could do is add a component to this, and I don't want to add a mesh. Whoops, I do not want a trail render either. But sorry, I'm not going to use anything on my empty object yet. If I go into create other, Unity already has some that they've created for us. So I'm going to make a cube. And so now I can see a cube, much like 3ds Max or Maya. It's just a cube with a mesh, nothing special about it. And if I wanted to, I could scale it different ways. And so maybe I want this to be like a basic platform for something to be placed on. And if I look at my game object now, it has the transform, which is the XYZ location, so I can move it around. And it has a mesh filter, which is the cube, and they even included a collider for me. And what a collider does is it basically allows objects within Unity to know if they're touching one another or not. And it prevents things with other colliders from falling through one another. This is known as collision detection in kind of game methodology. And Unity handles most of it for you. And then it's got a mesh renderer, which gives the material which gives the cube this gray material. So what I can also do is add a second game object. So let's just do a sphere. Let me pull that guy up, and so we can see our sphere here. And let me scale him around a little bit, like this. And where's my main camera? Oh, it's way over here. Let me get my main camera closer to my the rest of my scene here. Actually, I'll just delete the main camera and add a new one. So I can create a camera which will allow me to see my scene. And let me rotate this around. And if I play, I got my camera in a static spot. Everything is dark because I don't have a light source. So in Unity, what I can do is go into create other, and I can add what they call a directional light. And this is pretty much a light that will mimic the effects of the sun. And so if I hit play, now it's not illuminated. Why is it not illuminated? My light disappeared for some reason. There we go. Directional light. Oh, because I was in play mode. My mistake. So now everything's bright and I can see all that. So I'm just trying to give the basic ideas about Unity. Everything is done with game objects, and everything can interact with one another, and you can add scripts and everything to your different objects. And so what I could do essentially, now I have these guys in place, if I wanted, I could add, or better yet, I'll delete that guy, and I already have some assets made. I have a first person controller, which is a sphere object, and what it has is a camera attached to it. If I look under my hierarchy, I can see I've got the graphics, which is the sphere, and I have the main camera, and the main camera is basically in the top point. And if I hit play, the first person controller allows me to move and look around within my game, and I can fall off the edge and fall into infinity and stop playing. So if I take a look at my inspector over here, pretty much I just have a game object, which is where my transform's at, and then I have a character controller attached to it, which allows, which dictates to the object pretty much how it's going to move within the 3D space. And then I have some scripts attached to it, and this is a C# script. It's a mouse look script, and I can actually double click on this and open this up, and oh yeah, it is a capsule, sorry, not a sphere. And I can open this up in MonoDevelop and check out the mouse look script. And MonoDevelop is Unity's code editor. So there is a certain level of coding involved in Unity, and you're going to have to get familiar with some of it in order to really manipulate things and make it work the way you want. Some game engines like GameSalad, which is only for 2D, doesn't really require any coding, but when you're dealing with 3D, it's kind of impossible to make something without doing a bit of coding. So, I can look at the mouse look script and see what they're doing here. I'm not going to get into all of this, but I just want to show the scripting side of it. If I take a look at my character controller, I've modified this a little bit so that, I don't have, there we go. Okay, so I modified this a little bit so that if I left click, I can shoot out a little fireball. And it's pretty primitive, and if it hits the ground, it explodes. Of course, my ground is really overexposed because of my light, but it blows up, and it does make sound effects, but I don't think anybody can really hear it because I'm using a microphone. Anyway, so the way I implemented that function was I created a projectile script within MonoDevelop that basically calls for a rigid body object, which is basically a physics object. It has a certain level of damage associated with it, and it has a spawn point location, which is simply an XYZ position in Unity. And if I look at the projectile script, let me close some of these up, which is right here, it asks me to specify what the projectile is. And if I look into my assets, or my game objects, I have a fireball asset that I created, which is simply a rigid body. It has a sphere collider on it so that it can detect when it touches something to explode. And it has a render and a filter, which is how I give it the little fireball look. And I also have an audio source on it so it makes sound. So what I did on my first person controller here, I can click on this and hit none. Everything in Unity is drag and drop, by the way. I can drag the fireball onto my rigid body object here so that it knows to shoot a fireball object when I left click. And then for my spawn point, this is why I was having an issue a moment ago. It wasn't defined to anything, and my script needs to know where to spawn this fireball from. So I have a spawn point on my main camera, which is, if I look at my X value, it's kind of positioned right in front of my capsule here. And so this is where my fireball comes out of, because I need to be able to tell it to come out of something, and I need it to be far enough away from my capsule that it doesn't hit the capsule immediately and explode because of the collision. So when I take a look back at my projectile script, I can drag and drop my spawn point onto this so that it now knows when I play and I left click, and now knows to shoot that fireball from in front of me. And if I take a quick look at some of the scripting, I want to get into this a little bit. Unity uses 3 different languages that I'm aware of. There's C#, there's Boo, and there's JavaScript. I did these scripts in JavaScript because I'm a bit more familiar with that than C#. And it's important to note that Unity does not necessarily use traditional JavaScript. If you look at some of these items, if you're familiar at all with JavaScript, you're probably wondering, well, what's transform, what's rigid body, what's vector 3. These aren't normally things that are in JavaScript. These are part of Unity's API. And so some people call this Unity script because it's heavily modified. And so if I look at some of these functions, I got the if statement, which is one of the fundamental things in programming, but then I have input.getButtonDown fire1, and that the Unity API knows what this means. It's basically saying if somebody presses down the left click button, which is also known as fire1, then it's going to do this for me. It's going to create the fireball at a certain XYZ position within my game. It's going to create instances of that fireball, and it's going to instantiate it at a certain point, and then it's going to push that firewall forward at whatever rate is defined within their physics. And so I find Unity script to be very easy to adapt to, and the reason is because they have an API reference that is absolutely awesome. They have pretty much like everything you could want to know about their API is listed here, and they even go in and they give you like examples of what some of these different things do and how you can use them, and then they go into which variables, constructors, functions are all associated with it. This is all on their website, and I think when you install Unity, it also includes it on your local machine. So it's very expansive, it's very cool, and I pretty much learned my way around the Unity script within like a day of just reading through some of these things and learning how to manipulate them. So this is just the JavaScript side of it. I haven't really gone into the C# side, but for instance, this mouse look script is a C# script, and it kind of has some of the same items like rotation axis.mousex. That's a Unity function. So anyway, that's how the scripting works, and all of your game objects can have scripts applied to them, and that's how when I look at, say, this demo of the architecture demo I was looking at, that's how he got these doors to open when I came close enough. He probably had these two doors were game objects in Unity, and he would click on them, and he would add a script that basically said, if the first person controller comes within so much distance of these doors, swing the doors open at a certain velocity, etc. So again, that's the architecture example I was looking at earlier. I'm going to open up one of my other scenes here. Which one was it? I think it's test level. I think this is it. Okay, so where am I at here? Okay, so this was something I made up earlier. This has my first-person controller I was showing you with the fireball capability. I have a box that I can shoot at, and it rolls around and then blows up when it hits 0. Wow, that's a huge explosion. It's like a nuke. Anyway, when it hits 0, it explodes because this box has a certain amount of HP associated with it, which is defined by my health script right here. Basically tell it that it has there's also a regen rate where every 3 seconds it adds 5 HP to the box, and then I have a thing where if it gets hit, it loses 5 HP, and then when the HP equals 0, it explodes and then kills itself off from the program. Now the thing I wanted to show in this scene was, if I zoom out again, I have this big old plane here which looks like a map. It's very crude. I didn't do a whole lot to this thing. But I had somebody ask me when I did this presentation before if you could do level design in Unity because they didn't have modeling software available to them, and yes, you can. It's not going to be as in-depth as if you had Max or Maya, but they do have tools available to you to do this. I can actually go up and say create terrain, and that's going to create a terrain for me, which is this gigantic gray nothing right here. But I can add, they have what's called the terrain toolkit, and you can download this off of Unity, and this will allow you to go in and pretty much make a custom terrain and tell it to generate a Perlin terrain. You can see it kind of bevels and brings out certain features, and I can go in and I can tell it like I want a certain level of hydraulic erosion applied to it Oh wow, I didn't think that would take that long. And that's gonna like make the terrain look like it's eroded, and I can even go on and add textures, which is how I got the, you know, the white peaks on the mountains and kind of the sandy bottom and the green grass on this map here. And then I could also go into the terrain script, and I could say raise and lower certain features, much like a paintbrush and any other kind of software you might use. Or you can lower mountains, you can add, you know, like you could add flowers and trees and stuff like that. So you can do levels in Unity if you want to. Likewise, you can bring in models from other software into Unity and use them, which if you look down my assets, I have a bunch of stuff in here. And if I look at, I have my Maya open. This is in Maya 2013. This model is one of Autodesk's like default models. I'm a horrible animator and 3D modeler, so I'm just going to use one of theirs. And you see it's got the whole skeleton rig and everything. You can export this straight out as an FBX file. You could bake out animations if you want to. You could also even include light maps and things like that, and you can bring those into Unity and use them. Unity can do its own light mapping, but most of the time you're going to want to use the light maps that you develop in your 3D software. But you can bring all these things right into Unity. If I go back into Unity, you can see I have a whole bunch of different ones in here, but I can drag and drop my Maya rig in here, and it looks the same as it did in Maya because I didn't bake out any animations with it. Let me get off of my terrain script. There we go. But this was brought into my Unity because I exported the FBX straight into my assets folder. And even if I didn't export straight in my assets folder, I could literally export the FBX to my desktop and drag and drop it into Unity, and it will bring it in. Now normally it would just bring in the model, but I've modified this one a little bit. So if I call off my other first-person controller and I hit play, I can actually control from my Maya rig now. I can actually see my big nose if I look down far enough. And the way I did that was I brought in this model, and if I take a look at the Maya rig and my hierarchy over here, I added all the first-person controller scripts to it, including the character controller, and I also added my projectile script that I was talking about earlier. So this allowed me to essentially, oh, and my camera's up here at the head area. That's why we're seeing it from the top of my character and not, say, the bottom. And then I also have collision. I told this thing to import with colliders, which if I look at, say, my Maya rig asset here, and I look on my right, there's some different options for importing where you can generate colliders, you can generate light maps and all those things. And so I told Unity to generate colliders on its own so that my feet and my arms and everything have colliders associated with them, so I can manipulate those with scripts. And that's why I'm not falling through this terrain currently. And then furthermore, if I want to go back to the architecture example, if I look in my Revit program, I look at this building that I've got here. This is one of the default projects from Autodesk that comes with Revit, and this building is all, you know, I can look at my floor plans and everything like that. And so this building is architecturally sound. This might be something that maybe I would want to, you know, put into my game because it was designed properly, it looks good, so on and so forth. So I can actually export this straight out as an FBX as well and bring this into Unity, which is where I got, let me zoom out a little bit. My computer's really lagging. Which is where I can drag and drop this whole house, and that's the same thing that was in my Revit program. Now you'll notice the materials are not exactly the same, and this is actually a limitation with the Autodesk material libraries not properly working with Unity, but the proper workflow would be to export this FBX into like 3ds Max or Maya, and then associate all your materials properly, and then bring that out from Maya or Max into Unity, and then things will be proper for you. But like I was saying with that other guy's demonstration, he had those two doors that look similar to this. So likely what he did was he actually grabbed this specific asset and he probably went to add a component, and he probably added a new script that I'll just call ASD. Now I could go into my ASD script and I could start programming it to say, hey, whenever somebody comes close to this, swing these 2 doors open or slide them open or something along those lines. And likewise, I could go in and do a walkthrough of the house if I wanted by bringing my character in here and letting them walk around the scene. So I think I'm running a little over time, so I think I might be wrapping this up here in a minute. Last thing, you'll notice the sky too has clouds and everything. Unity allows you to create sky boxes. There's also particle effects and just pretty much everything you need to do a game in. If I check out which one, I think it's this one. I have another level. This one's called the snow level, and this was actually a tutorial project that I had. This is how I learned Unity. There's a group of guys on YouTube called 3D Buzz, and they did a Unity tutorial about how to make a whole scene with particle effects. Like, that's how you can see all the snow falling on me. There's a lens flare on the sun, and if I run over here a little bit, oh yeah, I have trees and everything. There's also fog, which is something you can add. There's a bit of a haze. I have steam coming off of the water here, so on and so forth. And I actually learned Unity by doing this project. It's real basic. I don't do anything but move around. I can jump, but taught me a lot of the basics, and it's got particle effects and everything. So all these functions are built into Unity. It's a very powerful tool, and I want to get to a Q&A in case anybody has any questions. Unfortunately, I can't go much farther into this. So anyway, yeah, I think I'll hop over to a Q&A real quick. If you guys have any questions, use the chat menu to do it. Chat menu is the second item on the left in your Join Me menu. Looks like everybody's been talking back and forth. Oh yeah, VJ mentioned the Tornado Twins. I've checked their stuff out too. They're pretty good. There's a lot of great Unity tutorials, and that's another thing I was going to get into. The best part about game design is it's one of those disciplines that heavily requires communication and kind of group work. And if you just go on Google or YouTube or anything and just type in Unity 3D tutorial, or if you could even have a really specific question like, how do I make a fireball explode when it touches a wall in Unity? And I'm betting you that you will find an answer to that as one of your first results on Google, and somebody will post the code to do it, So there's a ton of resources out there to learn this thing on top of the stuff that's built into Unity. Another cool thing is the asset store, and I wanted to talk about this because a lot of you are instructors, or some of you might be students. And this is actually a way you could capitalize a bit on the things you do in Unity, or maybe you're an independent developer and you know how to code, you know how to do all the technical part of it, but you don't know how to model. Like myself, I can't model, and I can't really ever dream of modeling or animating. But if I wanted to make a game on my own, I had a vision, I could come in here and find assets that I like and say purchase them. I don't know what this is. They've kind of changed this a little bit. So if I look at, say, this asset, they're charging $125 for it. This was probably just made by somebody who uses Unity, and they sell it for $125 on the asset store. Unity takes some amount. I don't know how much exactly. I've heard a lot of conflicting things. I've heard they take 30%. I'm not sure though. But I could pay $125 and get access to all of these assets, like these C# scripts, these shaders, so on and so forth. And I could bring all of these into Unity and use them for myself after I've purchased it. So the reason I bring this up again is because some of you might be students, independent developers, or instructors. If you have a student in your class who makes something really good, maybe he makes a script that's totally amazing, or he comes up with some kind of algorithm for generating wave movement in an ocean scene or something. Like, you could come onto here and sell that for a certain amount of money, and you can actually make some money off of it. And as we know, students are all broke and poor and in debt, so this is a great way to make some money to help afford your higher education or afford your housing, whatever. And plus, like I was saying, if you're an indie developer, there's a ton of things here that can help you get your game off the ground at very low cost. So that's how the asset store works. You can check that out, theassetstore.unity3d.com. And lastly, if you haven't used Unity, I definitely recommend you check it out because it's totally free up front. If you go to unity3d.com, just go to the download link and hit download Unity and check it out, and then you can check out the license comparisons. And just recently, I think 3 weeks ago, they actually made iOS and Android publishing totally license free. Of course, if you do iOS, you have to not only be running on a Mac, but you have to pay the Apple developer fee, which is like $90 a year. But for Android, for instance, you can actually build straight out now to Android. And in Unity, you can build out to the web player, PC, Mac, and Linux, Android, Flash, Google, iOS. And if you get the licenses, you can do the 360 marketplace, the PS3 marketplace, the Wii marketplace, so on and so forth. And you can build these straight out as like executables and run them. So it handles all that for you. You don't have to specifically program anything for it. If you do use things like Android and iOS, you have access to the accelerometer functions and some of those more specific hardware functions. But other than that, I'll check out these questions. So can you import Inventor files too? Yes, you actually can. I actually did this a little while ago. This is an Arbor Press machine. This was one of the Autodesk files that comes with Inventor. I actually brought this in from Inventor because you can export out, I believe, from FBX and Inventor. Let me open it and double check real quick. I want to close my Maya and Revit so I'm not lagging as hard. But if I look at my Arbor Press in Unity, it has all these sub items associated with it. So I have like the handle caps, the hexagon sockets. You could go as far if you want and program each and every one of these things. I could add scripts to them because they all show up here on the right as components. So I honestly have not seen what you would exactly use Unity for with Inventor files, but I imagine it's kind of the same idea as the architecture stuff. If you wanted to script it in such a way to demonstrate a design you have to somebody, you could do that. So let me check out Inventor real quick. And oh, I don't have my recent files, do I? Oh man. Open from Content Center. Maybe I want to do a... Just do this guy. While this is loading up, let me see some of these other ones. Can we import from Inventor files? Yes. How to import effectively? Whoa, I'm getting so many questions here. Jason asked, okay, well, hold on. Import Inventor files. Great. Free for free version, correct. If you have Pro, you have to purchase the Pro license. Yeah, that's correct, Jason. The free version is totally free. There's some features that aren't in the free version that are in the Pro. The Pro version you do have to purchase. If you're a student or an educator or a faculty, you can get discounts on the Pro version. You can even purchase Pro educational versions, or sorry, Pro commercial educational versions, which are still educational versions that you get a discount on, but they give you the legal grounds to commercially sell anything you make in it. Whereas if you just get like the education version, there are restrictions about what you can do with what you create. Unity doesn't own anything you do. It's nothing like that. It's just if you have an education only version, you're not allowed to use that for commercial purposes. But if you get the education commercial version, you are allowed to do that. I know it's a little bit confusing. And we actually have those on our website on Studica.com. If you check Studica.com/Unity, you can check out some of our pricing and things like that. So back to my Inventor question real quick. So I have this hex slot. I should be able to go right into exports. Oh, it doesn't do FBX. I'm trying to remember how I got my Unity out, or sorry, my Inventor file out. DWG, I can do STL. I think what I ended up doing originally was taking the DWG, and I believe I brought that into either Revit or CAD or Max, and then I would export from one of those programs out as an FBX file. So it's a bit of a workaround, but it is possible to do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to get this Arbor Press item in here. Other questions. Windows Phone support is in beta. That's correct. I just read that the other day. Windows Phone 8, I believe. Hi Mark, can we import from Inventor files? Yeah. How to import effectively from Blender, Maya, Max to Unity. So pretty much what you're going to want to do, let me reopen my Maya. All of those programs, Blender, Maya, and Max, all have native FBX export functionality. So I can, where's my really shoddy Maya rig? Oh no, I don't want to save. Okay, so with this guy right here, I can literally just go up to File in Maya. I can go File, Export All, and I can set up all my settings, and maybe I'll just save this to the desktop as Maya rig new, and I'm going to choose FBX export. I'm going to export all. It's going to give me an issue about a constraint, and then if I look at my desktop after I minimize everything I have my Maya rig new FBX here. I can literally drag this, open up Unity, and drop this into my assets, and there it is. And now I can drag and drop that in there. You can also go up to File or Assets, Import New Asset, and I can navigate to my desktop, find the Maya rig new, and import it that way. That would pretty much be your workflow for Blender and Max as well. Do the assembly constraints still work? You know, let me check that out. Where's my Arbor Press guy here? Ah, crap, I changed the name. Let me see. So the idea here is if I move this guy up or down, no, things do become disconnected. So it doesn't look like those constraints work. Now, there is probably a way, I haven't looked into it too extensively, to keep the constraints working together. I think ideally what you would probably end up wanting to do is actually script it that way, but that's something I would have to look into a little bit. I'm sure if you look around Google, I'm sure somebody's come up with a method of doing that. I'm not sure why the constraints don't export out. I'm assuming that's because it's specific to Inventor's functionality and it doesn't transfer out through an FBX file. Unique remodel file drag and drop. FBX has been my most successful method. Everybody's like answering these questions for me with much better detail, so thank you. What do you like to use for building GUIs? I'm gonna defer to what Adam and Jason are saying because I don't have too much experience in that. Easy GUI, NGUI, is Scaleform supported in Unity? I think Scaleform is supported, and the only reason I say that is because I remember playing a game recently that was using Unity and Scaleform in combination. That's something I'll have to look into a little bit. The new Unity, Scaleform, Unity, let's see. Scaleform Unity plugin offers an out-of-the-box integration. So it looks like it's a plugin, but I guess you can get it to work, yes. So the game I was talking about was, it's a newer game called XCOM, Earth Defense or something like that, and that has Scaleform and Unity both involved. Or sorry, not XCOM. It's Rad Soldiers on the iOS platform was done in Unity with Scaleform, I believe. And also, Unity is DirectX 11 compatible now, for those who may be wondering. Any other questions? There's a lot of information in my chat menu. And thank you to the people who have experience using this for helping some of these questions out. I don't really have anything else coming up. Again, if you guys are interested in pricing or wanting to know what it would cost you to get this in your classroom, you can check out our website, studica.com/Unity, and there's a couple of different sections here for Unity add-ons, Unity for schools, and Unity training, and you can see the list of products, and you can check out prices. And if you guys have any other specific questions or anything, you can email me again at markp@studica.com, which is right here. Alexander, hello. I was working with 3ds Max V-Ray for Unity baking, better quality than Beast. I need to find a cheap alternative. Do you have... Find a cheaper alternative. Do you have any idea for Unity baking? Are you talking about, Alexander, are you talking about baking like light maps or animations or what? For architectural rendering. Oh, okay. I know that there's a product called Lumion 3D, but I haven't worked with it enough to know if it will export straight out FBX into Unity perfectly fine, but some of the stuff I've seen in Lumion is really high-end looking quality. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Have you tried using Maya or anything at all? Yeah. Cheaper software, I'm not too sure because I don't know if Lumion's exactly very cheap either, but I would take a look at Lumion and see. It's Lumion. Other than that, I would probably do some searching around, Alexander. Check out Google and see what people say about that for architectural renderings. I know there's some blogs with people who have started using Unity with their models, and they'd probably have some really good recommendations for you. Jason, go ahead and you can toss a link, man. That's fine. What do you think about light mapping in Unity? From what I understand, I haven't done light mapping too much. Unity has light mapping functionality in it. To me, the rule of thumb would be if you were going to do all your modeling like within Unity, like you're not going to really be using much Max or Maya, and if you're going to be building your levels and everything in Unity, it might just be easier to use the UV light maps in Unity. But from what I understand, if you use Maya and Max in actual 3D rendering software, you have a lot more control over your light maps and how they look and the quality of them and things like that. So that's the only reason I said, to probably do UV light mapping in those softwares, is because you have more tools at your disposal, and typically it's going to be a bit higher quality, and you can bring those into Unity pretty easily. So yeah, if you guys are talking physics, look at what Jason's posting, because apparently he's done some physics work. B-slide. Okay, so Nelson's saying that the advantage of light mapping within Unity is that you get accurate lighting on your prefabs, which is true. It might be hard to get your lighting to be perfect if you're doing it in Maya without your prefabs and then bringing that into Unity. So, there's pros and cons to both. I guess it just depends what ends up working best for you. Whatever you're most comfortable doing is probably the approach you would want to take. So does anybody have any other questions? I'm already 7 minutes over. Not that I care, but... Doesn't look like I'm getting any other questions. Actual modeling in Unity 3 as an add-on? I honestly am not sure about that, Jason. There might be an add-on for it. You could have been dreaming. I don't know. I haven't looked too hard into modeling in Unity. I always figured if you're gonna want really good models, you're gonna want to do that in 3D Max or Maya or Blender or something along those lines. But if there is a plugin, I imagine it'd be worth checking out. Is there a slide that says this is complete? I don't have a slide that says it's complete, but I can create one for you real quick. New slide. This webinar is complete. Oh, hold on, I want proper punctuation. Thank you for attending. All right, is that good enough for you? Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me again, markp@studica.com, and all you guys will be getting a copy of this through a YouTube link, hopefully afterwards. Viewer 131, are there high-end spaces high school students on downloading for inputting 3ds Max of AutoCAD? I'm not quite sure I understand your question, 131. Are you talking about like to tort? Oh, okay. So do you mean like pre-created or already made like scenes, 131? Is that what you're talking about? Like, I'm sure you could find them. You would probably want to look at websites like I was talking about, like 3dbuzz.com. Some of the ones people were mentioning farther up the list in the chat here. There's a lot of people out there who will make all these different assets that you can use if you don't want to have to go through the level design process yourself, or if your students just don't have the means to do it. Again, you could also check out the asset store on Unity, like I was showing earlier, which I apparently have lost. Oh yeah, the assetstore.unity.3d.com. There might be some free ones you could download there as well. Yeah, some stuff in the asset store is free, so you might be able to find things there. And the Unity site also does have tutorials and pre-made scenes and assets for you to use. Possibly get a copy of the webinar. You'll be getting a YouTube link for it, and I could, if you want the PowerPoint, I could send that to you in an email. If you want, feel free to send me an email at markp@studica.com, and I can shoot you back the PowerPoint if that's what you're wanting. We'll also send you all the video once I have it uploaded to YouTube later today. Well, you'll get the link Tuesday. I'm going to be uploading it today and over the weekend. So if you want the actual PowerPoint, just email me and I'll be able to send it your way. Yeah, 148, we're just now ending. Sorry about that. We'll be sure to send you a copy of the webinar so that you can see what you missed. So I guess with that, I'll go ahead and close this out unless anybody has any last minute questions. I'm going once, going twice, waiting for people to type, going thrice, and I'm going to close the webinar. So thanks everybody for coming out, and again, email me if you have any other questions or want any of these materials. Thank you. I hope you all have a good day. Goodbye.